Hello boys and girls, thank you for joining us today. Alright, so we're gonna dive right into it by creating a Rust program, a fully fledged one, believe it or not. You'll get to build a full quiz game using different techniques and data structures. You look at vectors, mutable variables, control flows, while loop, if and else. It's gonna be a really exciting lesson, so stick around and let's get started. First things first, as you can see, I've got my Visual Studio Code opened. This is lesson number 3, so we are going to use Cargo. Again, if you recall from the previous lesson, Cargo is our package manager, and we'll use Cargo to create the directory structure for this lesson. So let's go ahead and type in Cargo new, and I'm just going to call it quiz game. All right, fantastic. So that's been created now. Now that the directory structure has been created, let's find our main.rs. So again, if you recall from the previous lesson, everything is contained in the source directory. There you go. So if I double click here, I've got my familiar Hello World program that has already been created for us. And this is thanks to Cargo. Let's try and modify this program. So what I want to do here is delete println exclamation mark as I don't need it anymore, and let's declare a few simple variables. So this is a quiz program. What do you need in a quiz? You need a set of questions and a set of answers. You need to keep track of the score, and you need some sort of index to know where you are in the question deck. Okay, so let me type this real quick and then we can go over the details. So let's start by printing the actual title of the game to the screen. I'm just going to call it quiz game for now, but we can change that later. Next, what we'll do, we'll try and declare a few variables. As I mentioned earlier, I do need a score variable to keep track of the actual score for every correct answer. And then I need the question index. And this variable basically serves as a tracker of where I am in terms of asking the correct questions to the player. Now, the last thing I want to declare here is the actual answer from the player, right? So this is quite important. And then I'll explain why we're adding this mut here against each variable. Now, in Rust, by default, all variables are immutable. What do I mean by immutable? Essentially, once it's declared, you cannot change it in the program afterwards. So, for example, if I were to remove mutable now and score is 0, I would not be able to come down here and go score equal 1, because essentially that is an immutable, i.e. the value will never change, right? So it's more or less like constant, but again, I'd be wary of making these direct comparisons, right? And maybe we'll dive deeper into a different lesson into the mutability of the variables. Okay, so anyway, think of this as a way to allow us to change the variable value at a later time during the program. Okay, now that I've declared my basic variables, let's go a little bit more sophisticated here and try and create an array of questions and an array of answers. So what's an array? Think of it as a collection of values, right? All contained in one variable. So again, if you're coming from Python or Node.js, you're probably familiar with lists, and in the case of Node.js, they probably call them arrays, JavaScript, etc. So yeah, let's declare this real quickly. So I'm just gonna call this questions. And again, don't worry so much about the actual keywords. So vec exclamation mark is essentially macro for creating vectors. Okay, I'm just gonna use 3 questions for this quiz, and I'm gonna call these questions as follows. What is the capital of France? And then the second value of this array is what is the capital of Germany? And then the final is what is the capital of Spain? All right, fantastic. So now I've created my questions array. Let me try and create the answer array. for this quiz. Again, I'm going to declare the macro called vector. So remember folks, for simplicity here, I'm using the term arrays, but in reality they are vectors, and this is how they are known formally within Rust. Vectors are essentially just resizable arrays. They grow and shrink over time, and it is the data structure of choice if you have a program that is similar to this. So in here, I'm just typing in the answers for the question array at line 8. Okay, so now I need a way to read the user's input from the terminal. How do I do that? Well, in Rust, there is a way to import libraries, or crates in fact, right? In this case, I'm just going to import the standard input output library. And the way to use it here is literally just going to come in here and go IO, and there will be a function that you can call, which is in the standard input, and it's going to be called readLine, and it takes one parameter, which is the mutable variable that will hold the value that was read from the terminal. In our case, if you look at what we typed earlier, it is line 7, and that is the variable that we will be interested in. Again, don't worry so much about all these ampersands that I'm typing here, and you know, the mechanics of calling these parameters, because I will explain that in a different lesson. For now, I really do want you to just type this program, get it to run, and then tinker with it. That is the key here. All right, so let's try and print what we just read from the terminal. The way to do that is, again, the println macro. And I'm just going to type in a string here that says you've just typed as an answer. Now, if you're wondering what these curly brackets are, it's essentially a placeholder for a variable that we can pass to println. In this case, it is answer. Okay, let's close the semicolon here, save, and let's try and run our program. You'll see a lot of warning here because some of these variables have been initialized but never used, but let's ignore that for now. There you go, quiz game. As you can see here, it is trying to prompt me for a value. So essentially the program pauses here until you actually type in a value. So let me just type in something simple here, and I'm going to, this is my answer. There you go, you've just typed, this is my answer. Okay, good. Now let's make something useful out of this, right? Maybe we can prompt the user for the actual question. How would we do that, right? We have everything we need. We have the variables, we have the vectors or arrays, if you prefer, right? That contains the questions and the answers. In fact, maybe let's just try and ask the user for the first question. The way to do that, again, is the println macro. And I'm just going to literally just put the placeholder, just as I mentioned earlier. And then I'm going to come in here and go questions. And I'm going to put the first index of the questions. Okay. And then, so what's the first index in questions? It is, what is the capital of France? Okay. And let's check whether this player will be able to find the correct answer. How do I do that? Well, welcome to the control flow, and this is if and else. Again, if you're coming from a different language, you'll be familiar with this concept. Now, I do have the answer already. I've just asked the question here at line 11. Okay, so this question will be printed in the user screen, and then what I will do, I will read the input from the user. Okay, now I need to compare it to a certain value. Okay, and let's leave number 13 for now, and let's insert another line in between. Okay, and this line would be an if and else statement. So what do I need to do here? What if we come in and go, does the answer actually equal the answers array at index 0? If it does, let's do println well done. This is the correct answer. Let's do an else here. Sorry, try again. Okay, let's run this program and we'll explain what this does. Okay, cargo. Ooh, we need to save first, so let's do that. And then we go cargo, run. There you go. What is the capital of France? And let's try Paris. You've just typed Paris, sorry. Try again. For some reason, it's not finding. And I think we know why, right? Because remember, it's reading the entire string, and that string does contain a new line character. So how would we remove the new line character from the user's answer? Well, there is a built-in function called trim. So let's give that a go. And let's save. Let's try and run the program again. Now, what is the capital of France? It's prompting me for this question, and I'm gonna type in Paris. There you go. Well done. This is the correct answer. And of course, if I run it again and type in the wrong answer, it will be the same result as I did earlier, right? Where I had an additional new line characters, and my comparison here that I'm doing at line 13 didn't work. So if I just type in Paris, for example, all in lowercase, it wouldn't work, right? It would just tell me, sorry, try again. Okay, folks, so this is definitely getting exciting now. Our program is coming together. Let's continue with this. Let me just clear the screen for my terminal. And now let's tidy up a little bit here. So I do not need line 18 anymore. Okay. As you can see here, my questions right now, they aren't typed in a static manner. For example, the only question I can ask is the first question. How can I make this a little bit more dynamic, right? Well, this is why we have our question index. But how can I keep iterating through these questions? How can I go, for example, what is the capital of France, what is the capital of Germany, and what is the capital of Spain? Well, you can do a simple loop. Again, folks, this is part of the control flow that we mentioned earlier, and I'll probably do a full lesson on how you operate a control flow. So I'll tell you what we can do here, right? I'm going to create a while loop that will iterate through the questions from 0 to 2. Again, remember vectors, arrays, they all start from index 0. Essentially, it will just iterate through these 3 questions. As soon as it reaches the last question, it will go back to the first one, right? So without further ado here, let me just go ahead and do that, right? Again, this is what we call an infinite loop. Don't worry too much about this. Of course, it is a bad practice, but as long as you have safeguards in place and guardrails, you know, maybe with a break and some if else statement, you should be fine. But for the purpose of this program, just for teaching, we'll just use an infinite loop here. Okay, so why do we have an infinite loop? Well, we need to iterate through the vectors / arrays here that you see, right? So let me copy all of this that you see from line 14 to line 20. I'm gonna put it inside the body of the while loop. Okay, and then what I will do, I will, instead of 0, I'll replace the 0 with a question index. Okay, so remember, I can't leave question index this way because at the moment it has a value of 0, so I need some way of incrementing it. And the way we do that, let's just go to the bottom here of the while loop body and try and increment it. So plus equals 1 is essentially just incrementing the variable by 1 every loop iteration. Okay, but what happens if it reaches, for example, at the end and it keeps iterating? Well, this is where you'll have an error, and so it will basically crash on you with an index out of bound error. So again, if you're coming from other languages, you'll be familiar with this type of error. Okay, so let's put some simple safeguard here, and it will be in the form of an if else, right? Essentially what we're doing here, we're just checking that our current index does not exceed the size of the vector, hence the question dot len. Okay, so are we in a position to run this? Let's have a look. So we are printing the question, and then we're reading the user's input. Okay, and then we're comparing the user's input against the actual answer array. Okay, again, we have a small problem is that the answer array itself is still pointing at 0. So let's take that. And because they are equal size, it's fine. Even though this variable is called question index, you can still use it. Because the questions and the answers array are of equal size, so you can use the same index to iterate through them. So let's try and modify the answers square brackets dot zero index there and insert our variable. And then let's type in the command cargo run again and see what happens. Okay, what is the capital of France? Paris. What is the capital of Germany? Berlin. What is the capital of Spain? Madrid. Okay, so now we have an error, and the error here says index out of bound. But why would that happen, right? The length is 3, but the index is also 3. Well, remember, as I mentioned earlier, the indexes for vectors and arrays starts at 0. So 3 is already out of bound because there is no value at index 3 in this vector. Okay, so to prevent that, let's do a greater than or equal, and that will stop it. Okay, so again, let's run it, save and run. Again, let's do Paris, Berlin, and Madrid. Okay, and as you can see, it comes right back to the first question. What is the capital of France? Okay, again, debugging and troubleshooting is the best way to learn. Here is an interesting behavior. We are typing in the correct answer, yet the program is thinking that we are typing in the wrong answer, right? It's coming back with sorry, try again message. All right, let's think about this for a second here. What are we doing wrong? Well, we can straight away spot the issue here is that the variable answer at line 13 when we read it is not being cleared, and the reason for that is that readline as a function just keeps appending to that variable, right? So let's try and reset it and rerun the program again. Okay, so I essentially did Control C, which will kill this infinite loop, and let's try and fix it. As I mentioned earlier, line 13 is continuously reading from the terminal and inserting the values into this answer variable. So by iteration 6 or iteration 7 of this while loop, this answer variable has already got so many values that the actual if-else here never executes successfully. So how can we reset it, right? Well, there's two ways. You can either reset the value every time the while loop starts, or reinitialize the entire variable. In fact, let's just make it easy on ourselves here and try and move the variable from line 7 to line 12, essentially reinitializing the variable every single time. Again, it's not best practice, but for now, for the purpose of this lesson, it should be fine. Let's save and run it again. So Paris, that works fine. Germany, Berlin. So remember earlier it kept failing. Now it says well done again. And the final question is Madrid as an answer. Okay, there you go. It says well done here. Okay, so because we are clearing the answer variable at line 12 every single time, it takes the answer from line 14 from the user's terminal, it trims the answer, and then it does the comparison. Okay. But now our while loop is continuously resetting every single time. What can we do here? Well, a couple of things we can do. We can either break as soon as we reach the upper bound of the vector. Okay, so let's give that a go quickly. So cargo run, and I'm going to type in just random letters here for each question. There you go. See? So as soon as it reaches the upper bound of this question vector, it exits. And this is thanks to line number 23. But what if the user wanted to reset the quiz again, right? So let's give the user a option to do this. All right. I'm going to try and reuse the same answer variable that we declared at line 12. Okay. And the way to do that, I'm just going to go answer equal, essentially reinitializing this variable. Okay. And I'm going to again read from the terminal. Okay. And I'm going to type in answer here. Okay, so basically line 24 will prompt the user to say whether they want to quit or continue. And then I'm just gonna compare the answer that I've just gotten. Remember, we need to do trim here to remove that carriage return. Okay, and let's do maybe, yeah, Q for quit, right? Again, you can get creative with this, but for now, let's just type in Q. All right. Now, if the user types in Q, let's take the break from line 28 and paste it into line 26. And then we'll go from there. Again, it's probably a good idea to actually prompt the user, otherwise, you know, the terminal will just pause waiting for input and the user wouldn't know what's going on, right? So let's just type in here println the macro and just say, would you like to quit? Okay, again, very quick and dirty. Let's try and run this. Random answers. There you go. Would you like to quit? So what happens if I type in just a random character? Okay, so it goes back again, so it resets the actual question index, and this is thanks to line 22, and then it starts all over again. So now let's try to actually quit. So let's give random answers, and here you go. Would you like to quit? Yes, sir. Okay, so as soon as you type in Q, it exits the program. Amazing. Now we have a program that essentially asks you questions and takes answers from the terminal, and then it checks whether your answer corresponds to the existing answers that we have built into the program. They're essentially hard-coded into the program, right? Let's make this more interesting. Let's maybe keep track of the score and print the score at the end of the question list, right? Once the quiz finishes, let's just print the score. Okay, so we do have a score variable here declared at line number 5. So let's increment the score every time there is a correct answer. And remember, line 15 is the condition that checks whether the answer is correct. And of course, this answer is coming directly from the user's terminal, and we're checking it against the answer bank that we have hard-coded here within our program. Okay. A good idea is to also maybe print out the actual score, i.e. the progress that the user has made so far at the end of the quiz. And the way to do that is to call println with 2 variables and print them. So remember, the curly brackets here means just a placeholder, and let's put those 2 placeholder as a parameter to println. And the 2 placeholders that we will need here is the score and the size of the vector itself. So essentially it will be 1 out of 3 in this case if the user only answered 1, or 3 out of 3 if the user successfully answered every single question correctly. So the first variable is score, and then the second one is question.len, which gives you the length of the vector. Okay, and now let's try and reset. So for example, if the user doesn't want to quit, we need to reset the score, right? So let's do that real quick. There you go. Let's save and run it and see what we have. I'll tell you what, let me do the first question and give it a wrong answer. Second question, let's do it the right answer. And then the final question here, let's give it the wrong answer again. So I should technically have 1 out of 3. Let's see. There you go. So quiz finished. Would you like to quit? So in this instance, I'll say no, thank you. So let's give that a go. Again, let's do 3 out of 3 this time, maybe, yeah? So Paris, Berlin, and Madrid. So I should have 3 out of 3 here. There you go, 3 out of 3. Would you like to quit? Yes. So folks, we have a fully functioning quiz program. Okay, and then maybe in the next lesson we'll try and tidy this up, maybe do some error handling, maybe do some more clever control flow here and matching and all that sort of thing. Okay, thank you so much everybody, and I'll see you in the next lesson.